Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Global Renaissance podcast, where we have thoughtful conversations on society and self. As always, I'm your host, Trev Woods, and today I'm joined by two of my bros. I've known both of these young gentlemen now over 13 years. It's been quite a long time. Benjy, Tchorzky, how you boys doing today?
Good, bro. Can't complain. Glad to be on here, bro, for real.
Yeah, thank you for having us. It's a nice Sunday. Happy Sunday, y'all.
Facts. Appreciate you guys for joining me. Both of you have been on before. Tchorzky's been this is like his fourth episode. Benjy, you've been on. You were like episode 8. It's been a while. What I wanted to talk about today. So we all went to the same middle and high school together. And as adults now, we have a mentorship program with the Black Student Union at the school. It's a predominantly white high school, and that definitely played a part in our experience. And so now we have a mentorship program. We had an event a few weeks ago, and we ended up having a pretty good conversation there. And so it inspired me to want to talk about our experience there, because I definitely think there was a lot of unique development that happened under those conditions. And so I wanted to speak on that. Do you guys have any initial thoughts before I kind of get into it about, what that was like? Again, so it's a private Catholic high school, 7th through 12th, so we all went to the middle school together. So this is back 2011, 2012. This was the start of our 7th grade year. So, again, wow. 13 years. What was that like for you guys?
That's a loaded-ass question.
For sure.
That's a loaded-ass question. I mean, for me, it was definitely small fish in a big pond, off the gate. So, I mean, even before BC, I knew Tchorzky through Stepping Stone. Like, this is like 2010, 2009 shit. So, having him, having my bro Jason as well in that program, it kind of helped me at least know, okay, at least I have some people here. And then just coming into a new space where it was, for me, I was coming from BPS. And for people that know BPS, it's a whole different area from what I was coming into at BC High. And for me, it was just my mom really told me, like, okay, you're here to change your life. You're here to change your life. You're here to change your life. And that was kind of a big imprint on me, making sure, like, okay, there's a reason why I'm here. I make the most of it. But at the same time, I was kind of wreck in school. I was kind of wreck in middle school. So that also was just a matter of, like, okay, how do I really fit in? And I felt the best way to fit in was kind of just like to stand out in an unconventional way. Do I look back on it and find it cringe? For sure.
Hey man, it's middle school.
But this is why it's development.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with a lot of what Benjy said. We came in not really knowing the lay of the land. A lot of people coming from different backgrounds, knowing Benjy and Jason, and just having that support system going in. But then obviously we got along like right off the bat in terms of like, well, we're the only ones that look like us here. So that was initial, which, I mean, when you say it out loud, it sounds maybe like that's the only thing that brought y'all together. No, not in that sense, but more so you recognize we have similarities. Yeah. We have things in common. Just being othered in that way sometimes allowed us to root our maybe sometimes differences in that common experience. So obviously, like you build bonds like that, which I feel like is the foundation of what we have, like, carried on throughout the years.
For sure. I mean, that is the realest thing, though. Like, you get there, and for me, like, coming from a suburb where, like, I was used to being, like, the one of the few black students, like, I didn't expect it to be much different. So I'm like, all right, whatever. Like, I'm going there. I know a couple people from my hometown who are there, so, like, cool. And we get there, and I'm like, oh, this is different. We got people coming from towns that I've never heard of. I don't know what a Scituate is. I don't know what the hell a Marshfield is.
It's a hole.
Right. And then I remember this to this day. Like, I remember the first couple days meeting kids, and they'd be like, oh, I'm from Hingham. Oh, I'm from Marshfield. And they would tell me, they're like, you're the first black person I've ever spoken to. I'm like, you're fucking lying. There's no way. So then I would go home and I would Google these towns, and I would go to their Wikipedia page, and I would go to the demographics part, and it would say 98.7% white. I was like, oh, they're not lying to me.
Right.
Like, and I definitely feel like that dynamic colored our experience, at least for me, from 7th grade on. And so I wanted to start there with Tchorzky, you kind of talked about it, feeling othered in a space. Can you say more about how that feels, especially being 12, 13, 14? You're young, like we're kids, and coming into a space where you feel automatically, maybe it wasn't said, sometimes it was said a lot, but maybe it wasn't said, maybe it was said, but you feel like there's the in group and then there's the out group, and you're not in the in group. What does that feel like?
Great question. I think that's something that people still deal with today, but at that point, especially being, like you said, 12, 13, you have to kind of figure it out yourself in a lot of ways, especially because our parents, they want the best for you and they have their own input, and obviously that's when you're still kind of impressionable and basing a lot of your decisions, your values, your thought processes off of what your parents had established for you. So you try to also balance that with, nah, I'm my own person. I like to do this, that, and the third. I like to get a little rowdy. Sometimes I might say something out of pocket. So,
Was liable to do that.
and a lot of times, sometimes when you get into that mode is when you start seeing how other people have their own belief systems, their own values, and even at that age, that played out a lot. Sometimes, mostly about one of our biggest differences, how we looked apart from different other groups. Ooh, that sounded a little shady. I didn't mean that.
I mean, what you're saying is we were black, and it was all white students. Like,
but not only that we were black, it's like we would be reminded that we were black.
Yeah.
And I think that's where that initial reaction came from, is that at a place where you're supposed to be learning and you're supposed to go there to gain access to, you know what I mean, better understanding of self and others, being othered in that way, like, I feel like create a lot of barriers.
Yeah.
Which didn't leave a good taste in your mouth.
Yeah. Benji, thoughts on that?
I mean, I feel like one of the biggest things I realized was that there was the people, those that were black that were in Boston versus, like, i.e. you, Trevor, that was it, black in Stoughton. At least you had people that could, like, advocate for you in some way to say, like, yo, Trevor's chill with us. For myself, Tchorzky could probably speak to a little bit. It was more so like, oh, you from Boston? Oh, you must be this. Oh, you must be in the ghetto. You must be
you're a trench baby.
You must be trenches.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, but
exactly. I mean, like, true to a part, but at the same time, it's like off the gate, 12, 13, you're getting typecast into these roles, and in some way, shape, or form, it can hinder you, definitely emotionally, definitely mentally, but also in a sense, like, you get, it's kind of like a Monopoly where you get sent to jail off the rip.
Yeah.
And you don't get that $200 and go.
Yeah.
And I felt like in a lot of cases that was one of the biggest differences that I've off the gate found at BC High. Like, okay, they're going to view me like this for a long time. That's how I found myself to just kind of like, okay, how do I make a lane for myself? And to this day, I kind of regretted the ways that I kind of try to pave a way for myself until I really realized who I was and realized who I'm not. And the things that I did back then, I definitely wasn't that. So
yeah. How did you craft an identity, knowing that there are these kind of external pressures, kind of looking at you and judging you based off kind of who you are, where you're from? Because I know, like, I definitely had a suburban black kid complex. Like, I was definitely overcompensating for that for sure. So it's like, oh, well, your fucking dad's a doctor. You're not black. I'm like, how is a white person gonna tell me this? I don't know. And it wasn't new to me. Like I said, people in my hometown used to say the same thing to me too. But I'm just like, what do you mean? You don't know black people. How are you telling me what's black and what's not? And you know, for me, that was like my battle. How were you, again, at a very young age, thinking about your own personal identity, your sense of self, and how does that run into the way people think about you? So if you're saying, like, I'm proud to be from Boston, and then people looking at you like, hey, you're from Boston, like, how did those things kind of conflict in your own mind?
I feel like in some way, shape, or form, I had to be more of a satirical character to them, to kind of like go through the motions, or at least like not think about the fact that I'm being typecast. You know, some of the things I did in middle school was I just did random ass shit. Like, I would just say random ass things, or I'll like be the guy like dancing around the locker rooms or some shit like that, or just off-putting shit that'd be like, oh, he's doing that. That's kind of funny, but in a weird way. Like, why is he doing that? But at least he's doing it to make us laugh. And I felt like that was a way for me to pave my lane. Once again, definitely wrong now. Think about it 15 years ago or whatever, 12, 15 years ago. But at the same time, it was something that at least kind of offset or put away, temporarily pause all the pressures I was feeling in middle school when it came to that.
Mm-hmm. Chauncey, what about you?
Yeah, so then was it really wrong? Like, I completely agree. Benji, there was a lot of times we were just out there trying to survive. So we built different techniques to connect with other people. Everybody wants to be understood. Everybody wants to feel like they're recognized. And a lot of times in that environment, even from each other, we didn't always know how to show up for each other. So you find ways to really assimilate. I feel like in a lot of those ways, we also developed a lot of good social skills that have translated into all of us being very successful where we're at and can continue to grow, I think, relatively, because we were just talking about it. Who would have thought that, you know what I mean, when we were at that then, everything was hypothetical. Everything was mostly, just dreams. But now we're starting to see that the fruits of our labor, even like you mentioned, the mentorship coalition program, if you will, it really came out of everybody inputting their own experience. And that's what made it powerful. It makes it powerful. And it continues to grow because people who are now in it, even in its nuanced, form, they get to add their own input and their own experience. Mm-hmm. So hopefully, hey, it's satirical or not,
Yeah, and it's definitely not like, I think, again, we were kids, bro, so it's not like you didn't know anything. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think the picture I want to paint for people who were like listening or watching is like we spent like all day there. So our high school, BC High, is in Dorchester. It's a commuter school, right? So it's private. It's not like a prep school where like people board or anything like that. Like it's a commuter school. You go and leave like a normal high school. But you have people coming from like all different parts of the state. So most people take the train to school. I took the commuter rail from Stoughton, Massachusetts, hop on the commuter rail, 40-minute ride into South Station, then take the red line to JFK, UMass, and then walk over to the school, right? Like people are coming from here, there, and everywhere. So, you get to school. School started at like 8:20, but most people were at school by like 8, if not 7:30 or before. And especially the older we got, the longer we were staying at school. If you played a sport, you're not leaving until 5, right? And then you got your commute home. So we spent a lot of time at the school. And so you do stuff to try to survive, as anybody does in any environment, but especially, again, we're starting off at 12, 13, you already have identity issues going on. You're changing, you're awkward, things are weird, right? So there was definitely a lot of stuff that I know I did where I'm like, that was goofy as fuck. And I would never do it now. I wouldn't have even done it at 16, but at 12, like I didn't have the wherewithal. I didn't have the experience to know better. So that happened a lot. One thing that I think came out of this environment was like our kind of social dynamic amongst our group, where it was like, we don't even have a fucking choice but to band together. I remember when I was younger, hearing all the stories of like integration back in like the 60s and shit, and like how things would happen, and you're like, oh, that was then. Yeah. And then you kind of get your own little taste of it. I am not comparing our experience to integration per se. Like obviously, like there are people who went through some like real crazy shit, like actually threatened their lives and whatnot. But you're going into a hostile environment to try to learn as a child, and that's tough. So I think particularly in 8th grade, I feel like we all were like, oh, like it's real, like it's actually like not sweet out here. We got to figure out what we're doing to navigate this together. And I felt like that created like a very, very, very strong bond. Do you guys have thoughts on that, just in terms of like how that environment and the situation that we were put in came to build the relationships that we have amongst our personal social groups?
No, go ahead.
All right. Well, I look at just the biggest thing, the lunch table.
Shout out to the lunch table.
We literally only had one lunch table, probably the size of these tables behind of us, probably twofold, and that was that for us, So whatever venting we had, I saw that as my safe space. You know,
Yeah.
every time I lunch, at least I had that to go to. You know, bullshit happens at school. Someone says something that's kind of wreck, but at least I had that to go to. You know, homework be crazy, but at least I have that to go to. So I found that as my safe space because, you know, like Trev mentioned, it was kind of treacherous out there where, you know, to the point where, you know, in middle school people were fighting over, you know, over boundaries and so on and so forth.
Yeah. That shit was crazy.
Wow. That's a
All the
throwback.
shit he got into.
Hey, I listen. But that's we were learning about ourselves and we were learning about each other. So as you mentioned, like you're gonna test boundaries sometimes. Somebody might say or do something that you're not necessarily cool with, and you have to make a decision whether that's something that you're gonna enforce or if it's something that you're going to try to understand. And that's how we build those skills that now we've been using. We didn't know that we're gonna have to use it to advocate for our, you know, basic human rights, but those are the skills that I feel like also led us into understanding the power of our voice and how to use it.
Yeah. I do, you know, I do think there's a lot of power behind, like, even sometimes when we, you know, might have taken it too far one way or another. Like there were times, because realistically, most of the time we just kind of took shit on the chin and didn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
But every so often, somebody had to get got. And I do think there's value in that too, where it's just like, yo, I'm not just gonna let you put me through bullshit and suck it up. But again, you know, kind of going back to these lessons I learned from learning about integration, it was like these people are literally getting rocks thrown at them and they can't do anything because they're gonna, you know, at best get kicked out. At worst, they're gonna die, right? So I think there was a lot of that where we would be in this position where stuff was happening. We're like, oh, this is crazy, but we can't really do anything about it. I remember freshman year. So we go through middle school, and then you go to the high school, and then the class size doubles. So it was like 150 kids in the middle school, and there were probably like 8, 10 black kids. And then class size doubles, so there was like, you know, 15 to 20 of us now. And I remember like the first week of school, there was a football game. And before the football game, we're hanging out. And it's me, Luke, I think Malcolm, we're outside. And they just got here. They don't understand the dynamics. They don't know what's going on. They were new. They didn't know. And that's like one of the things that now, like we, you know, when we have our program, we're trying to talk to the kids of like, yo, like this, be prepared. I don't think it's as bad now, but like you should be prepared for some of these dynamics. And you know, there was some conflict happening outside, and I'm just like, yo, you do see there's like 50 of them right now. Like you just, there's nothing you can do right now. You got to just take this on the chin and keep it pushed and deal with it later. But that to me was always hard. And Benji and I were talking about this a little bit earlier. When there are things in life that are happening and you want to change things, right? Like if you have a problem, you want to find a solution, you want to enact that solution. And there are a lot of times in life where you can't do anything immediately, or you might not be able to do anything at all. That's one thing that's been challenging for me from as long as I can remember. And it was a challenge in that environment. But I do think that it's created conflict resolution skills that are valuable. I don't always use them. I ain't gonna lie. I be talking shit. I don't be caring. Because that's the other thing. I don't know if y'all feel like this, but I feel like people to this day will try to like see what they can get away with with you in different environments. It might be a corporate environment, it might be an educational environment. Like it does not matter. People are always trying to get over on you. And to me, I don't have a lot of tolerance for that. Like I know some people are just like, yeah, whatever, like, doesn't matter. I'm going to just continue to do what I got to do. Like, I have a really hard time letting shit slide. I don't know about y'all. Like, how do you, whether it be, like, if we're going back to high school, middle school, or whatever, or even today, like, are you guys good at just, like, letting shit brush off you? Because I'm not.
I feel like I've gotten a lot better at speaking up on things. I used to be the type where, okay, some shit happens to me, it is what it is. Some shit happens to me, let me dust off my shoulders, it is what it is. But then I realized that people take that as a sign of weakness, and it's better to speak up and get the conflict resolved by you speaking out and speaking forth than to let it slide and you feel a way about it. 10 hours from now when you're waking up at 3 a.m. and like, damn, I should have done this better, or damn, I should have roasted him like that, or whatever. So I felt like, especially in those middle school to high school years, there was a lot of times where, bro, there's people touching my hair, and they're like, dude, like, how'd you get your hair like this? And there's times
You
where,
feel like a sheep, like, bro, why are you
right,
touching me?
and at first I'm like, oh, it is what it is, but you know, it happens again, and it's like, don't fucking touch my hair. Who the fuck do you think you are? And by the way, don't fucking take my pick and use that with your hair. Like, who do you think you are? Like, the audacity of some people.
Yeah.
So I feel like there was a lot of instances where people tried you, and it was either take it to the chin or punch them in the chin, literally or figuratively or whatever, you know.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there was a lot of ways that we were always there's always conflict, and I feel like in a lot of relationships there's gonna be conflict. Like to your point, Travis, like how you find that resolution. There's been times, especially Benji told you, we've known each other since about 2009. Trev, we've been since like 2 years right after. So there's been many times where both of these gentlemen can say that I have not been the kindest version of myself.
He used to be a wild boy.
Um,
Wild boy. This man
I've,
has become so tranquil.
reformed.
It's like, who are you?
Developed into a T.
But I have to be honest though. It's part of that. I will say that, especially at that time, I had gotten to a point where I was so adamant about who I wanted to be as an individual, which really I didn't even know who I still don't. We're all on a journey. That's separate. But at that point, I was like, this is exactly who I am. This is exactly what I want. I'm going to say what I want. I'm going to do what I want. I'm going to try to get what I want. And I feel like at that point, you try to learn how to survive in those ways, and that's what I was doing. I was like, if nobody else is going to get me what I need, I'm going to make sure that I'm the individual who is going to make sure that I get everything I need. And sometimes that was at the detriment of a lot of others' feelings, relationships, etc. And I had to take ownership of that. And I feel like later, once we got into high school, and I started really understanding the greater scope of how when you treat others in a way, because hurt people, it really negatively impacts you long term. So I was like, nah, I don't want to make other people feel like that. But alas, life is life. So sometimes, yeah.
Yeah. Have you found? Because I do, think about, at least for me, like I know these were very formative years, and they definitely colored how I, walked through the next phases of my life. So I know that's why I'm saying like I'm really bad when I feel like somebody's trying to slay me, especially like doing some passive aggressive shit. I'm like, no. Like we're gonna address this right now. Like if you got problems, have a problem. Like we're not just gonna let this slide because it'll fester into something larger. Do you feel like in your adult life now, you run into people who are openly like agitating or in some way trying to get under your skin, trying to undermine you? And do you feel like you are, I think you particularly, Tchorzky, you're probably less kind of aggressive about it, but do you still address it in the same way of like, no, like I don't care, you could be my fucking boss, like I don't care, you're not about to disrespect me because I'm a human being? Or have you found that in this world it's more necessary to let certain things go from certain people?
That's a great question. I think that you have to constantly let go. And that's something that I struggle with, which is why I feel like I can't really give you the perfect advice because there is no perfect advice. There's some things, some days you feel slighted, you feel like somebody's actively trying to get under your skin. Yeah, that's annoying. Like it's something that we used to do to each other. Like you would just try to, hey, like you
dickheads, bro.
Why you mad though? So at a certain point too, like you can recognize it in somebody else when they're trying to get that. But what I had to realize is you have the choice to give somebody else your power. You have the choice to be who you are and who you choose to be, even when somebody else is standing on different standards.
Mm-hmm. It makes sense. I like that.
I know for me, I can definitely echo what Tchorzky said. But in the corporate workspace that I'm currently in, that there's a lot of microaggressions and implicit bias. There would be times where I'm in a space where I'm kind of thriving for myself in my corporate life, and there's spaces where I'm maybe one of few, and because of that, certain conversations don't get brought up. But then I miss a one-on-one meeting, or then I miss a meeting that I should have been looped in on, or something like that. Or there's times where I feel slighted because of the opportunities that I'm given to, and because of that, people already have a perception. Oh, okay, he's here for that. He won't go that far, or whatever, or he can only go so far, or whatever. And it hurts to an extent, but it also drives me to prove him wrong.
Yeah.
That's always, and I feel like I always had that ever since middle school.
Yeah.
Prove people wrong. I can't do that. Watch me try. I can't do this. I'll do it twice. There's been a lot of situations like that. So I look at that as kind of a developing trait in where I am now compared to where I was.
How does it feel to be a DEI? Because I know, like, I haven't heard, like, you're only here because you're black in a very long time. But when we were in high school, oh my goodness. It was like, oh, if you get into a good school, it's only because you're black. It's like, my GPA is a full point higher than yours. What are you talking about? For you, particularly in like a corporate environment, like I know it happens. People might not say it, but I know you can feel it. Like, what is that? Do you do anything about that, or you're just like, whatever?
I mean, it's a bit of both. So the way I got into my corporate life was through a rotational program, and it was the pilot year of that program. So to a lot of people, they thought, it was a DEI related hire, not knowing the skills and the resume that I had, or the academic credentials that I had as well. And to this day, in my new role, it's still like, oh, he's from the rotational program, and look where he's at right now. And it's like,
oh, they're trying to like billboard you, like, oh yeah, guys, look what we did for him. Oh, that's nasty.
Right. So there's a lot of times where I say, okay, yeah, it's been a year and a half since I graduated from that program, and now I'm in my new role at the workspace that I'm at, and it's like, look what I've done in the year and a half that I've been in this new role. Don't look at what I've gotten myself into and how I got into this space, but look at what I've done now. Look at the value that I provide now.
How do we feel about this idea in general, right? Like, I mean, obviously, we have an incoming president who, that's a talking point. Elon, who they're doing whatever together. I don't know. But that's a talking point. That's a major talking point, this DEI thing. How do we feel about that in general? How, like, I know we've had conversations over the years about reparations, affirmative action, all of these various things. How important do you feel like it is for there to be specific considerations made to groups of people who traditionally have not had access to things because of organizational blocks, right? So whether it be like legal, whether it be institutional, but there have been conscious efforts made to block groups from getting access to certain resources and opportunities. How important do you feel like it is for there to be now programs to undo that? Do you think it's important? Do you think like it puts those groups or those people who get those opportunities at a disadvantage? Like, what do you feel about that?
That's a great question. I'll say that you're completely right in asking what we're going to do in the next 4 years. It's going to really take, I think there's a lot of organizations out there who are trying to undo the work, who are trying to undo a lot of the organizational barriers that have been set in place. But at the same time, we've had this conversation before. Mind you, it was at a cookout too. So like we have these conversations. But it's like the system has to be at some point, parts of it have to be broken and rebuilt as opposed to just trying to change what has been already set in place because the very design of it is fractured in a way. So that's my answer, and
he said, "I'm gonna leave it right.
I'm
there
gonna leave it right there."
Benji and I were talking about the United Healthcare CEO before you got here. I'm gonna say it because I don't really got shit. Benji's not good. Benji's like, I'm staying away from this one. But this has been such an interesting instance of that kind of idea that you're talking about of like. Everybody knows, like, not that the system is broken, but it is designed in a way that's not meant to help most. And just over the last week to see the overwhelming reaction of people like, I don't give a matter of fact, good for the shooter. Like, it's been I don't think I've seen anything like it personally before, where like it seems like regardless of political affiliation, for the most part, like there's a large swath of people who are just like, I mean, thoughts and prayers, I guess.
Right.
Or it's like, you know, health insurance is, I mean, all insurance sucks, but health insurance, you know, there are people who are actually quite literally losing their lives because they're getting claims denied. And so, you know, someone looks at like somebody taking this as, you know, vigilante justice, taking it into their own hands and just saying like, fuck you. Obviously, we don't want to ever encourage like violence or loss of life, but, you know, at a certain point, it does feel like, what the fuck else do you expect people to do? If you fuck people over long enough, like,
You're bound to get fucked over yourself.
right. So I'm very interested to see what that particularly and just the energy around that has created. Because again, you know, we've had a bunch of flashpoint instances. I talk about, you know, when we were in high school, our sophomore year was like bookended by like national racial turmoil. I don't know if you guys remember, it was in August, so right before our sophomore year of high school started. That was when Mike Brown in Ferguson.
Mm-hmm.
That was like August of, it was probably 2015, I think. Don't quote me on that. It was either 14 or 15, but it was the beginning of our sophomore year. And then in the spring, it was Freddie Gray in Baltimore, and the riots were happening. And so, like, this was like, when you sophomore year is like 15, we're like 15, 16.
Yeah.
So I know for me, like that was what radicalized me. I started reading books. I hate reading. I started reading books. I read the new Jim Crow. I read the fucking autobiography of Malcolm X. Like I was reading. I was on my radical shit. Like I was doing all that because I'm like, are we just gonna sit here and take it? Like what are we gonna do? And then as I got older, I kind of like the kind of youthful rebel energy kind of left me, and then I was like, well, there's not really anything I can do. I'm gonna just focus on myself, like whatever. And then more years went by, and I was like, well, if everybody thinks that way, then we'll never do anything. So I got to figure out my pocket. How do you guys find, or what do you guys feel like your roles are as individuals when it comes to changing things in the broader landscape of your communities in the world?
I know for me, I know I can't make a significant impact from a continental or country landscape.
Yeah.
Off the rip, I'm only one person. But what I can do is help my community out. So, you know, whether it's through our mentorship program at our former alma mater, or even through what I do in my fraternity, helping the community through like food pantries or prison book donations and so on and so forth. It's starting in my community because I see, being part of the community growing up, I knew the resources that I didn't have. Now that I have some of the resources, I want to be able to give back in some way, shape, or form to those that I know are still struggling. So I look at that as just driving factors to what I want to do and what I want to continue to do. You know, social impact in that sense, starting small from the community in the local landscape at least, and then from there. If with more reach and engagement, if that leads to state, country, continental like impact, then God bless that. Mm-hmm. But if I can at least start my community and help that one day at a time, I feel good in some way, shape, or form at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I don't know. And I think there's a lot of strength in saying I don't know sometimes. I feel like sometimes we should lean into I don't know a little bit more just because that's something I struggle with. We're at a place right now where, like Benji was mentioning, there's global implications. Like, if you look at it, you start thinking if people make their own system of justice and ethics, then it's like, what's the constant thread between each of us? In Haiti, I mean, there's genocides going on across all over the world, so we want to acknowledge that. But specifically in Haiti right now, there's a lot of gang violence that you see is being incited by the people, taking it out on their own people. So you can see something very similar happening, if you can imagine, in the U.S., if it's like not even just on a racial basis, but on a classes base. It's a slippery slope.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's true. I think, but, for me, thinking about these things, having, through undergrads, particularly doing some, formal studying on, the way, like sociology, anthropology, like the way power affects communities or the lack of power affects community being exploited, all of these things. And then also knowing that, I've been pretty privileged to not have to deal with those things. It to me is imperative to think about like, well, okay, well, in what ways can I at least advocate, at the very least advocate, right? For some shift and try to empower people in a certain way. And I do think it is important to say I don't know when you don't know, because I think a lot of times we try to like pretend like we have answers and we don't. And I for sure don't have any answers. But to me, I'm always thinking about like what can I do? Because there's a lot of stuff that's shitty, yo. Right. Like, I mean, over the last year, I've been on Twitter and I've seen like beheaded babies. Like, this shit is crazy. You feel me? Like, you'll see images of stuff, and there's so much because we have the internet, so we have access to so much information. I feel like the world's been like this for forever, but we haven't been able to see what happens everywhere. And it sometimes feels like, well, what the hell am I going to do about all of this? Right. But I do think that it is in the attempt, that's where things happen. And I'm kind of cynical, so I think we're always going to, be, up under something. But it's like, well, how many people can we at least get to a point where they can live somewhat well? And there's so many levels to it. I was talking to Benjy about like the election, for example. And in the lead up, like the last 2 weeks before the election, right? Not, I don't think Donald Trump's a good president. I don't. Argue with me if you want to. But I don't think that man is good at his job. And I think when we talk about policy, right, like I don't think conservative economic policy works at all. I think we have like 50 years of evidence that it doesn't work. But when you go and see people talking about these things, there is a lack of education, I feel like, amongst just regular people. Like for me, again, I always come from this position of like I am more educated than the average person, so it's like I'm not going to sit here and expect someone to know what I know because they haven't had access to the information and the resources that I have. But like how do we get people that information? How do we get people that access? Because fundamentally, people make choices, and not everything that happens in people's lives is caused by their own choices. But how can we empower people to make the best choices for themselves in the ways that they have, the agency to affect them? Because it's like, again, there's so much that happens in our lives that we can't control. I can't control whether Congress bans TikTok or not. I can't do it. All right, they're not listening to me. I can't control whether Joe Biden decides to send billions of dollars to Ukraine or Israel or whoever else. But maybe I can control like what my local school board is deciding to do. But there's a lot to be informed about if you're trying to do all that. Right. Like, do you guys ever feel overwhelmed by just the amount of stuff there is to pay attention to? Like, you got work, you have your own personal stuff. You're trying to figure, like, we all in our mid-20s is like, I'm trying to figure my own life out, right. Like what I want to do next. Like, you've had, again, Benjy and I were saying, like, you get into the point where you do something well, and then it's like, you like pat yourself on the back, maybe real quick, and then you're on to like, okay, what's next? So I feel like we're all kind of in that stage, and then you also have these considerations outside of yourself to make. Do you guys ever feel like, fuck, this is too much, I can't deal with this all? And then how do you manage that?
I can say how I manage it, but
if you know, you know.
But
good greenery.
Love that. But I think our generation is the last generation to remember a time where there's pre-computers and people were just doing things, and then boom, iPads, iPhones, so on and so forth, and information overload. And I think there's been a shit ton of that, especially with the amount of mediums that we have to digest that. And I feel like for me, it can be overwhelming sometimes. I won't lie and say like, I wish I could just have my phone on D&D for the entire time, because sometimes I do. But it could be so daunting at times where you're like, oh shit, I gotta do this. Oh shit, I gotta make sure I'm good. Oh shit, I gotta make sure the people that I love are good as well. Oh shit, I gotta make sure I'm also progressing while still doing all these things. And it can be very stressful. I look to just, going to the gym, listening to music, sports as coping mechanisms for that. But I also look at just realizing just also to talk. I used to be very much what happens in my life happens in my life. I never used to be the person that was like, everyone's going through their own shit. I used to be the person that said, I'm going through a lot of deeper shit, so my priorities or my sadness outweighs those of others. I learned that that's not the case now. I learned that's never been the case. I learned that people have always gone through their own shit, and I realized that it's good to kind of just talk. Mm-hmm. It's okay to talk. It's okay to vent sometimes and just have people realize, damn, bro, I've been through that shit too. Oh, damn, bro, I haven't been through that, but I know someone who has. Here's what he did. Maybe look at that. Communication works in some way, surprisingly. Mm-hmm. And I'm learning that as I grow.
Mm-hmm. That's why I love, the opportunities to get together with people who've known you for a long time, because it really allows you to see yourself throughout those different time capsules. And what Benjy said was really profound. So definitely I'm taking even pieces of that. It's like little nuggets of wisdom you hear from the people you love, the people you care about, because they not only share experiences, but they have their own experiences. And since we care about each other, even through the conflict, you're able to recognize we're also growing together and seeing each other's development, seeing each other's, the things that's been in each other and the things that we continue to grow and add to us, I think is part of that, which is why I'm very excited to continue learning from each other, continue growing, and continue to have interesting discourse where sometimes it gets a little rowdy.
Sure. I completely agree. I feel like, one of the reasons I want to have this conversation is I've known y'all for over half my life, which is crazy. And we have gone from little kids to grown adults, which is also crazy. I'm not that responsible. But, there's been so much development that's happened, and there's been segments of our life where we've all been together, and then we've been apart, and then we come back together, and there's just so much that we learn about ourselves and about each other, the growing that we do together, and I've just always found that super valuable, especially the older we've gotten, especially, again, doing the mentorship program, going back and looking at kids who were in a position that we used to be in. It's dang, we've come a very long way as individuals and as a collective, and I think that's a really beautiful thing. So I appreciate you guys for joining me. If you guys are listening to this or watching, if you're listening to this on an audio platform, 5 stars rating, please. If you're listening to this on YouTube, like the video, comment, subscribe, all of that good stuff. You guys know where to find me at. I'm on social media at @TrevWoods. The podcast is on That shit died too. That's so crazy. The cameras are not fucking with me today. It is what it is. But yes, if you are listening to this on an audio platform, Apple, Spotify, please leave a rating or a review. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like the video. Please subscribe to my channel. I am on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. TikTok is getting banned. So, follow me there, but you won't be able to do it for long. @_TrevWoods, the podcast is on Instagram and TikTok. At the Global Renaissance Pod. And where can people find y'all?
Y'all can find me on Instagram at Benjamino, BenJymino. Also, if y'all follow Toasted Chef, please follow Toasted Chef. We do catering of a special variety.
Facts.
With a magical twist. Also, follow my cooking Instagram at Baked Bites Co. as well.
Fendi.
That part. Come on now. You can find me on everything at Tchorzky, TCHORZKY. Hey, good to see everybody. Have a great week. Thank you again, Trev. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, Trev. Always a pleasure, guys.
I appreciate y'all coming on. This has been another episode of Global Renaissance Podcast, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.